Before the clip even finishes buffering, you can feel it, the tension, the silence before the storm. Fans are shocked, insiders are whispering, and one man is being haunted by a single sentence he never should have said. This is the moment that changed everything. The moment Gene Deal regrets talking about Diddy. It started like any other casual interview. A chair, a microphone, a few nervous laughs. Gene leaned back, confident, almost smug, like a man who believed the past could no longer touch him. He'd been there, he'd seen it all, or so he thought, but as soon as the words left his mouth, the air in the room shifted. The smile faded, the pause stretched just a second too long, and suddenly, everyone watching knew something was wrong. Because this wasn't just another story. This wasn't harmless nostalgia. This was a door being cracked open to a world people weren't ready to revisit. Fans are shocked because they can hear it in Gene's voice, the hesitation, the regret creeping in mid-sentence. One moment he's laughing, the next he's swallowing hard, eyes darting off camera as if someone unseen just warned him to stop. But he doesn't, he keeps talking, and that's when the damage is done. Within minutes, clips begin circulating online. Comment sections explode, emotions ran high as longtime supporters argue with furious critics, each side convinced they finally know the truth. Some say Gene is finally being brave, others say he's gone too far. And behind the scenes, phones are ringing, texts are being sent, old alliances are suddenly under threat. What makes this moment so chilling isn't just what Gene says, it's what he almost says. A name half spoken, a memory cut short, a laugh that sounds more like fear than humor. Viewers can practically see him realizing, in real time, that some stories don't fade, they wait. People close to the situation claim the fallout was immediate. Friends went silent, former allies distanced themselves. In Gene, he tried to walk it back. He tried to clarify, but the internet doesn't forget, and once the family was left divided, there was no undoing it. This isn't just about fame. It's about loyalty, betrayal, and the price of speaking too freely in a world built on secrets. One conversation, one moment, one regret that may follow Gene Deal forever. And as the clip ends, with Gene staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, one question hangs in the air. What did he just unleash, and who is going to make him pay for it? The room felt heavier the longer Gene Deal spoke, like the walls themselves were listening and judging every word that slipped out of his mouth. He had walked into the interview calm, relaxed, almost amused, leaning back in his chair like a man who believed he had survived the worst already. The cameras rolled, the lights burned hot, and for the first few minutes it felt like just another conversation about the old days, the glory, the chaos, the nights nobody ever slept. But then the conversation drifted, slowly, dangerously, toward a name that still carried power, fear, and loyalty all at once: Diddy. Gene smiled at first, a knowing smile, the kind that told viewers he had stories no one else dared to tell. Fans leaned closer to their screens as he chuckled and said people wouldn't believe half of what really went on back then. Emotions ran high even in the comments as the live chat started flying by faster than anyone could read. Some cheered him on, others warned him to slow down. But Gene kept going. His voice shifted when he mentioned loyalty, when he talked about protecting people, when he hinted that not everyone came out clean. That was the moment insiders say he should have stopped. He talked about being there night after night, about seeing arguments explode out of nowhere, about how silence was often the price of survival. His tone changed again when he said there were moments he still thought about late at night, moments that didn't sit right. The interviewer leaned forward, sensing gold, asking softly if there were things he wished he'd handled differently. Gene paused. The silence stretched. You could almost hear his thoughts racing. Then he sighed and said there were conversations he regretted not having, and conversations he regretted having too much. Fans are shocked because that was when Gene crossed the invisible line. He started describing a night that everyone close to the circle remembered but never discussed publicly. Voices raised, tempers flaring, someone storming out while others stayed quiet. Gene didn't name names at first, but he didn't have to. The tension was thick, and everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. He said power changes people, and sometimes it reveals who they always were. As soon as those words landed, the energy in the room shifted completely. Behind the scenes, phones started buzzing. People close to Diddy were already reacting, already calling each other, already asking why Gene was opening doors that had been sealed for decades. Gene noticed something was off. His eyes flicked to the side, his jaw tightened, and his voice dropped lower. He laughed it off, saying people always twisted his words, but the damage was done. The clip was already being shared, chopped, reposted, stripped of context and fed into a hungry internet. He went on to say that loyalty back then wasn't optional, it was demanded. That saying the wrong thing at the wrong time could cost you everything. Family was left divided, he admitted, not just blood family but chosen family, crews that once moved as one now split apart by fear and ambition. He said he stayed quiet for years because he believed that was the right thing to do, because speaking out never ended well for anyone. What made the moment even more intense was when Gene started talking about regret. Not the quiet kind, but the heavy kind that sits on your chest. He said there were nights he replayed conversations in his head, wondering if he should have walked away sooner, if he should have spoken up, or if silence really kept anyone safe. The interviewer asked if he felt free talking about it now. Gene didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed his hands together and said freedom always comes with a price. Outside that studio, reactions were already pouring in. Fans took sides instantly. Some praised Gene for his honesty, saying it was about time someone told the real story. Others accused him of betrayal, of rewriting history, of chasing attention at the expense of people who couldn't defend themselves. Emotions ran high across social media as clips hit millions of views in hours. Old photos resurfaced, old interviews were re-examined, every word Gene had ever spoken was suddenly under a microscope. Gene tried to steer the conversation back, saying he wasn't attacking anyone, that he still respected Diddy for what he built. But even that sounded shaky, like a man trying to patch a crack in a dam already breaking. He said success breath sounded louder. Then came the moment people now call the turning point. Gene started a sentence, stopped halfway, and shook his head. He said, "Never mind, I shouldn't even say that." The interviewer gently pushed, asking what he meant. Gene laughed nervously and said some stories aren't meant for daylight. But his eyes told a different story. They looked tired, conflicted, almost afraid. That was when viewers realized this wasn't calculated. This was someone losing control of a narrative he'd kept locked away for years. Friends watching from home reportedly reached out immediately, telling him to stop, warning him that powerful people don't forget. Gene admitted later that his phone lit up before the interview even ended. Messages ranged from concern to anger to outright threats. Family members called asking what he was doing, why he was reopening wounds that never healed. The family was left divided not just over loyalty, but over safety. As the interview wrapped, Gene tried to soften his words, saying time changes perspective, that everyone made mistakes. But the clip didn't end with peace. It ended with uncertainty. Gene stared ahead, quiet, as if finally realizing the weight of what he just shared. Fans are shocked because that silence said more than any accusation ever could. When the video went live in full, the internet exploded again. People dissected every facial expression, every pause, every nervous laugh. Conspiracy theories bloomed overnight. Some claimed Gene was being used. Others said he was finally free. But one thing was clear. The moment Gene Deal talked about Diddy, there was no turning back. Regret had already set in, and the storm was only beginning. The fallout didn't wait for morning. By the time Gene Deal stepped outside, the night air felt sharp, like it was cutting into him. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating in his pocket, a constant reminder that whatever control he thought he had was gone. He tried to tell himself it was just noise, just people talking, but deep down he knew this was different. This wasn't gossip, this was history waking up angry. Inside the car, his driver asked if everything was okay. Gene didn't answer right away. He stared out the window, watching city lights blur together, replaying his own voice in his head. Every word felt louder now, heavier. He remembered the moment he almost said too much, the look on the interviewer's face, the way the room went cold. Regret crept in fast, wrapping around his chest. Fans are shocked, he thought, but they didn't know half of it. By the time he reached home, social media was already on fire. His name was trending, paired with accusations, praise, threats, and wild theories. Old associates posted cryptic messages. Some said loyalty meant silence. Others hinted that the truth always finds daylight. Emotions ran high as people argued over who was brave and who was reckless. Gene scrolled until his hands started shaking, then tossed the phone onto the couch like it burned him. His family was waiting. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. One relative demanded to know why he would stir this up now. Another said they understood but feared the consequences. Voices rose. Accusations flew. The family was left divided, split between those who believed silence was protection and those who believed silence was guilt. Gene tried to explain that he hadn't planned it, that the words just came out. No one seemed satisfied with that answer. Late that night, an old friend called. The voice on the other end was calm but cold. He said people were unhappy. He said some doors should stay closed. Gene felt his stomach drop. This wasn't a threat, not directly, but it didn't need to be. Gene apologized, said he didn't mean harm. The line went quiet for a second too long before the call ended. He sat there staring at the dark screen, realizing how fast things were escalating. The next day, blogs and channels picked apart the interview frame by frame. They slowed it down, zoomed in on Gene's face, speculated about every pause. Fans are shocked because even the smallest details became evidence in the court of public opinion. People claimed to see fear in his eyes. Others said it was guilt. Some said it was finally relief. Gene watched clips of himself and barely recognized the man speaking. Requests for interviews flooded in. Some wanted the truth, others wanted blood. Gene declined most of them, suddenly aware that every sentence was a potential weapon. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. People reminded him of favors done long ago. Of lines not to cross. Of how quickly support could disappear. Emotions ran high as Gene struggled between defending himself and protecting everyone involved. One night, unable to sleep, Gene poured himself a drink and sat alone, thinking about the past he thought he'd buried. He remembered nights filled with shouting, with laughter that felt forced, with loyalty tests that came without warning. He remembered choosing silence because it felt safer. Now, that silence was breaking apart, piece by piece, and he wasn't sure he could stop it. Meanwhile, fans took sides harder than ever. Hashtags formed, reaction videos multiplied, some demanded Gene tell everything. Others warned him to stop before it was too late. The family was left divided not just privately but publicly, with relatives liking posts on opposite sides of the argument. Every move became a statement whether he wanted it to be or not. Gene tried to issue a clarification online, saying his words were misunderstood, that he never intended to accuse anyone. The response was brutal. Critics said he was backpedaling. Supporters said he was being silenced. Emotions ran high as the clarification only added fuel to the fire. Even those who believed him questioned why he spoke up at all if he wasn't ready for the consequences. Late one evening, another call came in. This time, the tone was different. Angrier. Gene was reminded of things he'd benefited from, doors that had been opened for him. The message was clear without being spoken. Gratitude is shown through loyalty. Gene hung up and felt the weight of years press down on him. This was the moment he truly understood the cost of talking. News broke that legal teams were paying attention. Nothing official, just whispers, but whispers were enough. Gene's friends urged him to lawyer up. His family begged him to stop engaging. Fans are shocked as rumors of lawsuits, silencing tactics, and behind-the-scenes negotiations swirl nonstop. Gene felt trapped between telling his side and protecting himself. He began to realize that this wasn't just about one interview. It was about a system built on fear and loyalty, about who gets to speak and who doesn't. Gene had cracked the surface, and now the pressure from below was pushing back hard. Every time he thought about going quiet, another clip surfaced, another theory exploded, another wave of attention crashed over him. One afternoon, Gene sat with someone he trusted deeply, someone who'd been there in the early days. That person told him softly that some truths destroy more than they heal. Gene argued that lies did the same. Neither had a real answer. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument. As days passed, the tension didn't fade. It sharpened. Gene slept less. He jumped at every unknown number. The regret grew, not because he'd spoken, but because he'd spoken halfway. Fans are shocked because they could sense it too, that unfinished feeling, that sense that something bigger was being held back. Gene knew then that part 2 of this story wasn't up to him anymore. The moment he talked, the narrative escaped his control. And whether he spoke again or stayed silent, the consequences were already in motion, rolling forward with no sign of stopping. Gene thought the noise would eventually fade, that outrage always had an expiration date, but this time it didn't. It only grew louder, sharper, more personal. Every morning brought a new clip, a new headline, a new anonymous source claiming they knew what Gene really meant. Fans are shocked not just by what was being said, but by how fast the story was mutating into something Gene no longer recognized as his own. Private messages started leaking, old photos resurfaced, frozen moments from years ago suddenly repackaged as proof of hidden truths. Gene watched as strangers narrated his life with confidence, filling in gaps with imagination and accusation. Emotions ran high as former allies avoided his calls, while others reached out only to ask what he planned to do next, as if his silence or speech alone could shift the balance of power. One night, unable to take it anymore, Gene agreed to meet someone he hadn't seen in years. The location was discreet, quiet, chosen carefully. When the man walked in, Gene immediately felt the weight of the past settle between them. No hugs, no smiles, just history. They spoke in low voices, circling the issue without naming it directly. Gene said he never meant to hurt anyone. The man replied that intentions didn't matter anymore, consequences did. The conversation turned tense fast. Accusations slipped out, followed by denials. Gene was told he'd opened wounds that were never meant to heal. He fired back that some wounds fester when ignored. The silence afterward was brutal. Finally, the man leaned in and said something that stayed with Gene long after the meeting ended. Once you remind people you know the truth, they stop seeing you as harmless. At home, the tension inside Gene's own walls worsened. Family dinners became quiet, awkward affairs. Some relatives refused to discuss the situation at all. Others argued late into the night about whether Gene should finally tell everything or retreat completely. The family was left divided in a way that felt permanent. Gene felt like every choice he made hurt someone he loved. Meanwhile, speculation around Diddy intensified. His silence became a statement. Fans analyzed his past interviews, his lyrics, his business moves, connecting dots whether they belonged together or not. Some accused him of hiding. Others praised him for staying above the chaos. Emotions ran high as the narrative shifted daily, sometimes hourly. Gene's regret deepened, not because he'd lied, but because he'd spoken without preparation. He realized too late that partial truth can be more dangerous than silence. One afternoon, his lawyer warned him that even defending himself publicly could backfire. Gene felt trapped, like he was being squeezed from all sides by expectation, fear, and unfinished business. A producer reached out with an offer. A tell-all series, total control, huge money. Gene laughed bitterly when he heard the number. For a moment, temptation flickered. He imagined clearing his name, owning his story. Then he imagined the fallout. The calls, the threats, the people dragged into the spotlight who never asked for it. He turned the offer down, but the fact that he'd considered it scared him. Fans are shocked when Gene disappears for a few days. No posts, no statements. Rumors swirl instantly. Some say he's been silenced. Others say he's negotiating. The truth is simpler and heavier. He's exhausted. He spends hours replaying that interview, wondering which sentence changed everything. He realizes regret isn't loud. It's quiet, relentless, and patient. When Gene finally speaks again, it's not in an interview. It's in a private room, with people he once trusted with his life. The meeting turns emotional fast. Voices crack, tempers flare, old grievances resurface. One person accuses Gene of betraying the code. Gene accuses them of hiding behind it. Emotions ran high until someone storms out, slamming the door so hard the walls shake. Afterward, Gene sits alone, shaking. He understands now that there is no clean ending to this story. No version where everyone walks away satisfied. He thinks about the young version of himself who believed loyalty meant protection, who believed silence was strength. He wonders if that version was naive or simply doing the best he could. Online, the debate grows uglier. Fans dig into Gene's past, questioning his motives, his credibility, his character. Others defend him fiercely, saying truth-tellers are always attacked first. The family was left divided publicly now, with distant relatives giving interviews, hinting at secrets without naming them. Gene feels exposed in a way fame never prepared him for. One evening, Gene receives a message from someone he never expected to hear from again. The words are brief but heavy with meaning. It's not forgiveness. It's not a threat. It's a reminder that nothing said can ever be taken back. Gene stares at the screen for a long time before deleting the message, knowing the memory will remain. He starts to realize that regret isn't about wishing he'd never spoken. It's about wishing he'd been ready. Ready for the backlash. Ready for the loss. Ready for the truth to demand more than he could give. Fans are shocked as Gene retreats further from the public eye, leaving behind unanswered questions that grow louder with every day of silence. Deep down, Gene knows this story isn't finished. It's paused, waiting, and whether he ever speaks again or not, the moment he talked changed everything, setting forces in motion that no apology, no clarification, and no amount of silence can ever fully stop. The quiet didn't bring peace, it brought paranoia. Gene felt it in the way every passing car sounded suspicious, in the way every unknown number made his chest tighten. Silence had become its own kind of noise. He stopped watching reaction videos, but people sent him screenshots anyway, reminding him that the world was still talking even if he wasn't. Behind closed doors, conversations took on a different tone. People spoke carefully now, measuring every word around him like he was suddenly dangerous. Gene noticed it immediately. Pauses lingered too long. Eye contact broke too quickly. Trust, once assumed, now had to be negotiated. Emotions ran high because no one wanted to be the next name pulled into the storm. One afternoon, a former associate showed up unannounced. No cameras, no record, just two men sitting across from each other with years of shared history between them. The associate didn't yell. That almost made it worse. He calmly asked Gene what his endgame was. Gene didn't have an answer. He said he just wanted to breathe. The associate shook his head and said breathing gets expensive when powerful people feel exposed. That meeting ended without resolution. No threats, no forgiveness. Just a warning disguised as concern. Gene walked away feeling smaller, realizing how much of his safety had always depended on being overlooked. Now, he was anything but. Meanwhile, the narrative online shifted again. New voices emerged claiming insider knowledge. Some accused Gene of holding back to protect himself. Others claimed he was being pressured into silence. Fans are shocked at how quickly sympathy turned into suspicion. Even supporters began asking why he wouldn't just say everything if he had nothing to hide. Gene's family felt the pressure too. Relatives were approached by bloggers and producers. Some refused to speak, others couldn't resist the attention. One distant cousin hinted at dark secrets in a low-budget interview that went viral overnight. Gene watched it in disbelief, anger boiling over. The family was left divided deeper than ever, lines drawn between those who wanted privacy and those who saw opportunity. Arguments at home became routine. Gene's partner accused him of underestimating the fallout. Gene accused everyone else of pushing him to stay silent for years. Emotions ran high until words turned cruel, cutting deeper because they came from people he loved. Some nights, Gene slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering when his life became a cautionary tale. Behind the scenes, quiet negotiations began. Intermediaries reached out, offering solutions that sounded more like compromises. Stay quiet and this will pass. Apologize without admitting anything. Disappear for a while. Gene listened, nodded, but felt hollow. Every option required him to swallow something he'd already choked on once. One night, Gene sat alone and wrote down everything he remembered. Names, places, moments, not to publish, just to see it all in one place. The pages shook in his hands. Seeing it written made it real in a way memory never had. He realized then why people fight so hard to keep the past buried. It isn't just dangerous, it's undeniable. As weeks passed, the story began to fracture. Without new statements, speculation fed on itself. Some fans moved on to the next scandal. Others stayed obsessed, convinced Gene was the key to something bigger. Emotions ran high in comment sections that now felt more like battlefields. Gene's silence became its own accusation. Then came the leak, a short audio clip, grainy, contextless, allegedly from years ago. No one could confirm its authenticity, but that didn't matter. It fit the narrative people wanted. Fans are shocked as the clip spreads faster than fact checks ever could. Gene listened to it once and felt sick. Whether real or fake, it didn't matter. It sounded like truth to people who wanted one. Gene's lawyer advised him again to stay quiet. Speaking now would only validate the chaos. Gene nodded, but inside, had become risk. Isolation crept in quietly, settling into his routine until loneliness felt normal. He wondered if this was how it always ended for people who stepped out of line, not with drama, but with disappearance. Late one night, Gene watched an old clip of himself laughing, surrounded by people who once felt like family. The contrast hurt. He whispered to himself that he never wanted this, that he just wanted the truth to stop rotting inside him. But truth, he learned too late, doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just spreads the pain around. As the weeks blurred together, Gene accepted something he'd been fighting since that first interview. There was no going back to who he was before he spoke. The moment he talked, he became a symbol, a threat, a question mark. And whether he ever opened his mouth again or not, the story had already moved beyond him, growing, mutating, waiting for the next crack to widen. The pressure finally cracked into something visible when Gene realized people weren't just watching anymore, they were waiting. Waiting for a mistake, a slip, a confirmation. Every silence became suspicious, every movement interpreted as strategy. Gene felt like a man standing in the middle of a room where everyone else already decided what he was guilty of. One morning, he woke up to headlines claiming he was preparing a bombshell confession. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter anymore. Fans are shocked at how confidently lies spread when fear feeds them. Gene read the article slowly, noticing how quotes were invented, how intentions were assigned to him without ever asking. He felt his identity being rewritten in real time. Behind the scenes, pressure from powerful circles tightened. Intermediaries stopped sounding friendly. Their messages grew colder, more direct. Gene was reminded that some names carried weight that could crush anyone who challenged them, even indirectly. One message mentioned Diddy without context, just the name sitting there like a warning sign. Gene stared at it for a long time before locking his phone and setting it face down. The fear wasn't just professional anymore. It seeped into daily life. Gene avoided familiar places. He changed routines. He checked his surroundings more than he ever had before. Paranoia became second nature. He hated himself for it, hated how easily confidence had turned into caution. Emotions ran high because he felt like he was being punished for honesty he never fully delivered. Family tension reached a breaking point. A heated argument erupted when someone accused Gene of dragging everyone into danger for his own pride. Gene snapped back that silence had already cost them years of peace. Voices echoed through the house. Accusations turned personal. The family was left divided again, this time with wounds that felt impossible to close. Someone stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Gene alone with the realization that truth doesn't just expose enemies, it fractures homes. Online, sympathy waned. The internet demanded escalation. Fans wanted more details, more names, more proof. When Gene didn't deliver, frustration turned ugly. Some accused him of manipulation. Others said he was cowardly. Fans are shocked at how quickly admiration turns to resentment when expectations aren't met. Gene felt trapped by an audience he never asked for. Late one night, an old voicemail surfaced. Its origin unclear, its timing suspicious. It didn't say much, but it implied enough. Blogs ran with it immediately. Reaction channels dissected every syllable. Gene listened once and felt his stomach drop. It wasn't incriminating, but it was suggestive, and suggestion was enough. The regret hit him hard again, heavier than before. Gene considered disappearing completely. No statements, no presence, just gone. But friends warned him that absence would only deepen suspicion. Stay visible, they said. Control the narrative. Gene laughed bitterly. The narrative had been controlling him since the moment he spoke. Emotions ran high as he weighed every option and found none without consequences. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Gene spoke privately to someone younger, someone who looked up to him. The question was simple and devastating. Was it worth it? Gene couldn't answer right away. He finally said that truth feels necessary until you see what it costs. The silence afterward was heavy with disappointment neither of them voiced. The media cycle moved on briefly, distracted by another scandal, but Gene knew better than to relax. Stories like his didn't disappear, they waited. He lived in that waiting, in that constant tension, knowing that one spark could ignite everything again. Alone one evening, Gene admitted something to himself he hadn't wanted to face. The regret wasn't about fear. It was about timing. He'd spoken too late to change the past and too early to survive the future cleanly. He felt caught between generations, between codes that no longer protected him and truths that didn't fully free him. As days passed, Gene accepted a painful clarity. The moment he talked, he stopped being just a man with memories and became a symbol people could project onto. Villain, hero, liar, whistleblower, none of them fully true, all of them loud. Fans are shocked because the story refused to settle, refusing closure. Gene looked at his reflection one night and barely recognized himself. The confidence was still there, buried deep, but layered with caution, regret, and resolve. He didn't know yet if he would ever speak again publicly. But he knew this much. Silence would never feel the same, and words would never be harmless again. You've just witnessed a story that refuses to sit still, a moment that keeps echoing long after the words stopped. The moment Gene Deal spoke didn't just spark conversation, it ignited division, fear, loyalty tests, and questions that still don't have answers. Fans are shocked not because everything was revealed, but because so much still feels unfinished, like a truth paused mid-breath. As you sit there right now, watching, listening, replaying moments in your head, ask yourself what you would have done. Would you have stayed silent, protected by distance and denial, or would you have spoken knowing the cost could follow you forever? Gene Deal didn't just tell a story, He stepped into a storm, and once you step in, there is no clean way out. Emotions ran high because this wasn't just about words. It was about power, loyalty, fear, and the weight of history. Every pause you heard, every look away from the camera, every unfinished sentence carried meaning. And the silence that followed spoke even louder. Some believe Gene Deal said too much. Others believe he didn't say enough. That split alone tells you how deep this goes. And then there's Diddy, a name that doesn't need explanation, a figure whose presence alone changes the temperature of any room, any story. The fact that one conversation could cause this much reaction tells you everything about the stakes. This wasn't gossip, this was a reminder that some legacies are built not just on success, but on secrets, and when those secrets are disturbed, the shockwaves travel far. The family was left divided, friendships cracked, and fans turned into judges overnight. Maybe that's the most unsettling part. How quickly the audience becomes part of the story. Because now you're involved too. By watching, by reacting, by choosing who you believe, you're shaping what happens next. And that's where you come in. If this story made you question loyalty, truth, and silence, then you already know this conversation isn't over. If you felt tension in your chest listening to Gene Deal hesitate, if you felt anger, sympathy, or confusion, that means the story did what it was meant to do. It made you feel something. So now ask yourself another question. Do you think Gene Deal regrets speaking because he was wrong, or because the world wasn't ready to hear it? Do you think silence protects people, or does it protect systems? And if this is only part of the story, do you want to hear the rest? This is where your voice matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back, tell us where you stand. Was Gene Deal brave or reckless? Was this a warning, a confession, or something in between? Do you believe more will come out, or will silence win again? The comment section isn't just a reaction space, it's part of the record. And if you're still here, still listening, still questioning, make sure you don't miss what comes next. Hit the like button if this story kept you locked in. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the moments everyone else will be talking about tomorrow. Turn on notifications because stories like this don't end quietly, they resurface when you least expect them. This channel exists for the stories that make people uncomfortable, the moments others rush past, and the conversations that don't have easy answers. If you believe entertainment isn't just about drama but about tension, consequence, and truth tangled together, then you're in the right place. Remember, this wasn't just the moment Gene Deal talked. This was the moment everything shifted. And whether the next chapter is silence, confrontation, or something no one sees coming yet, you'll want to be here when it happens. Because the story isn't finished. And neither is the conversation.